Today we're going to talk about waste audits, how to perform a waste audit, and what sort of data you need to collect from there. We're talking to Kerstin Mayer of Busch Systems here today. Now, Kerstin is a sustainability and diversion expert. I think it's fair to call you.
I mean, I hope so.
At this point,
Yeah.
right? Well, thank you so much for joining us on Talking Trash with Will Nash. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always down to talk sustainability and waste diversion, so I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm going to hold you to it.
Yeah.
This is your first, but definitely not your last episode of Talking Trash. So this is one of those topics that comes up, especially in the sustainability and the environmental spaces. You know, when it comes to a waste audit, first of all, what is a waste audit?
Yeah, great question. And it can really depend, depending on who you're talking to and what industry you're in. So I think waste audits on a big level, when we're not looking at anything specific, are just generally analyzing the type of waste that your organization is generating and how much of it and where it's going. So we're really just trying to get a baseline of what's happening with waste at your organization. And then you get to use that information to inform decisions you make later on, depending on what your goals are.
So obviously a lot of information in there. If you are looking at starting up a team, or maybe there's a couple of individuals that want to come together to perform and execute this waste audit, where do you start? What do you need? Are there any sort of like permissions that you need to get from your place of employment?
Not usually. I think what we usually recommend is kind of forming an in-house green team. And normally we just say, grab some people who are, into sustainability, who care, because it's going to be a lot of data that you're collecting. In some cases, depending on, how big your facility is or how much waste you're going to be analyzing, it could take a few days, and you want to be able to spend a little bit of extra time with those people. So grab some people that are interested and who are passionate about sustainability and who are willing to contribute to the effort. And that's usually about as far as you have to go in terms of creating a green team.
That's great information. And when it comes to obviously us being here at Busch Systems, we both are employees of the company.
Yes.
I will say I loosely assisted the waste audit.
Hey, you did more than you think.
I was helping it a little behind the scenes with you. What kind of tools and equipment would you require at your workplace to actually get it going?
For sure. So I think outside of just general PPE, because you are going to be interacting with some waste, the biggest things would be something to record your data on. So we usually recommend a laptop, but you can also just do it on paper. So, printing out a chart or whatever you need to record. And the other big one is a scale. So usually, although waste audits can be done visually, and you can kind of take your trash bags and kind of estimate based on what looks to be the composition of the waste in the bag, normally we'd say sort it and then weigh it. So you can get an actual percentage of how much of that waste was coming from different things like trash or recycling or compost.
The one thing about using a scale with this is a lot less intimidating
Yes.
than you having to step on the scale yourself, right?
Exactly.
Because you're not going to be judging the trash in that way. And now, I guess it really depends on the kind of business that you are running or that you work at. But what have been are you able to share some findings with what we found? Or is it like, what are some of the things that a typical company would assess afterwards?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it depends on your goals. So you collect a ton of data, and how you analyze that data really depends on the context that you did your waste audit in. So for us, we were doing a generalized waste audit. We were trying to figure out how much waste are we generating and what is the most common types of waste items, so that we can better create a waste program that helps divert things from landfill. So there's also different ways you can do it with specialized. Maybe you're just looking to get batteries out of the trash, or maybe you're trying to implement composting and you're just trying to understand how much food waste and other composted items end up in your trash, so that you know kind of what bins to get and kind of informs your program. So it really depends on your goals. But I know for us, a big one was paper towels, right? And that's just the devil, the paper towels.
The devil.
We have a lot of bathrooms in here, and we typically use hand towel or paper towels in our washrooms. And so a large amount of trash that we were generating was paper towels. And we were trying to figure out, okay, what is the composition? How much is truly paper towel? Where can we cut down on things so that we are generating less waste in general? So, we did find that I would say probably closer to 90% of our waste was paper towels. So that right there is a huge indicator for us that, hey, if we just replace our
Yeah.
paper towels with hand dryers, all of a sudden the quantity of waste that we're generating has gone down almost 90%. So
And that makes a lot of sense. And that's a big improvement from where we are headed now
yeah,
compared to where we were before from
huge.
your findings. So is it fun to just dig in trash, or is it just really gross?
I don't know if fun is how I would
like,
put it.
is it like, or is it one of those things? Like, what's the strangest thing you found?
I mean,
I don't know if I'm calling anybody out here at Busch Systems, but
we really didn't find anything too funny
okay,
at Busch Systems just
okay,
because most of our waste is office related. So
hmm
it's food or it's packaging materials from our warehouse. So
hmm
nothing too crazy. But depending on where you are, you might find really interesting
yeah.
things in there. So
I
you
just found
do have to wear your gloves and maybe a mask depending on how much food is in that waste, just to keep yourself protected because sometimes it can get a little smelly.
a little behind the scenes here. So I just found that a lot of my coworkers apparently have better lunches than I do.
Just for the waste audit, right?
Just for the waste
I
audit.
can't believe they threw it out instead
I
of
know.
giving it to
Yeah,
you.
exactly. It looked delicious.
Yeah.
So, you've completed your waste
Mhm.
audit. You've spent a couple of days doing that, depending on, of course, the size of your business, the team that you have assessed, that you have put together to help you out with that. The follow up, the messaging, maybe changing of the signage. Like, how much of a process is that? And how hard is it to change the perspective of the people in your workplace to follow these new rules, follow these new guidelines?
Yeah, I love that question because behavior really drives the success of waste
Mhm.
programs. And the information we get from our waste audits can also drive the education that we and the campaigns that we put out for employees. So, again, it does depend on what your organization is doing. So, for
Mhm.
some offices like ours, where it's a little smaller, a
Yeah.
little more closely knit, an education program where we're simply announcing what we're doing and kind of indicating to people where
Mhm.
things need to go is likely good enough. But sometimes, if you're looking on a bigger scale, like
Mhm.
maybe a university campus or a college campus, where the people who are interacting with your waste program
Mhm.
aren't necessarily driven by the
Mhm.
outcomes or they don't necessarily care where their waste ends up,
Mm.
then those campaigns get a little bit more complex and it's a
Yeah.
little bit more about how do we change behavior. So that's where we get into kind of, we found a bunch of paper
Yeah.
towels, so we're going to put little signs that say, please don't put your paper towel in here. So using that data can help you find creative ways to educate people and to kind of make small changes over time.
What if you're working in an organization and, of course, like being more sustainable,
Mhm.
being concerned with the environment and waste ideally should be something that's important to everyone. I'm
Right.
sure you've faced your challenges with other people that you've crossed before who maybe weren't as on board as you have been
Right.
with this sort of a thing. What is a line or two, or what's a couple of sentences that you're going to say to someone to say, okay, this is why you should do it?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, sustainability, if people are passionate about that, can
Mhm.
be a huge motivator. But if we're putting that aside and we're just talking about the business case, I would say, hey, let's cut costs.
Mm,
Um, it costs money for your organization to haul waste from where you're working. So the more waste that you generate and the more volume of waste that you have, the more expensive it is. So if you can perform your waste audit and find out exactly where that waste is coming from, and even find ways to stop it at the source. So for a lot of, say, offices,
mm,
paper waste is a huge issue, and those things can be solved, pretty fast by
yeah.
just doing things digitally more often. So that's a simple solution that makes a huge change in the cost of your hauling for waste and recycling. That came from finding out that, whoa, in our waste audit, we found there was a ton of paper. So although there can be small changes, it still can have a huge implication for your costs.
I don't know if this is something you can reveal or not on our podcast because this is like just
We'll
episode.
see.
This is just episode number 2, and I don't want to completely put you on the in the hot seat, although you are in the hot seat right now. Is since we have sort of come up with our findings for our waste audit here at Busch Systems, and obviously
Mhm.
the messaging is all over our building. Have you had any pushback, or what has the feedback been since we delivered those results?
So there hasn't been pushback. I think feedback normally comes in the form of, "Hey, I just didn't know,"
Yeah.
or no one had told me before. And
Mhm.
normally, once you let people know that this is something important and there's kind of a sense of identity and
Yeah.
culture in your organization, then people want to get on board with that and kind of feel included in those things. So there hasn't been like pushback, but I would say the feedback that we've gotten is, "I just had no idea."
It's funny. I found the same thing. A few of us get together most days and we'll have lunch
Right,
in the
right.
lunchroom here at Busch Systems. And it's like, I'm kind of like, putting my back to all of you. I'm like, hopefully I'm putting this in the right thing. And, one of our coworkers here one day called me, that doesn't go there. I'm like, well, I didn't know that, but now I do know that.
You're like, I was just trying to have lunch. It wasn't.
It's that
not
learned
here to be called
behavior,
out.
right? And also, it really depends on, from what I'm understanding through, your information, it really depends on where you live.
For sure,
And in terms of like what bin it actually goes in, which is just sounds so easy and so simple, but you don't think about it until you're working for a company or following those guidelines after waste audit. Like, no, this is where that goes. And this is a messaging. So I know that this is where that goes, which is important in the workplaces, but also any business, schools and whatnot, right?
Especially for, like you said, schools where you're having people interact with your program who are from multiple different places, or even just a large organization where people are commuting from different townships that might have different rules. The in-office rules of recycling, let's say, don't always match your curbside pickup rules. So having that education campaign and being able to identify those issues from your waste audit and then come back to everyone and say, hey, I know you do this at home, but it actually doesn't work for us here at the office, can sometimes change behavior just like that.
I feel like I need you to write me a little pocketbook. The difference,
little cheat sheet.
The differences between the workplace and home, and making sure you're putting things in the correct places as to where they should go. Well, I've learned so much again today about what we've been talking about. We've been talking about waste audits. Kerstin, thank you so much for joining us here. Kerstin is a sustainability and diversion expert advisor here at Busch Systems. Really appreciate you, and hopefully you'll be back on again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime.